Recording.
Is this on?
Start. Welcome back, and guess what we're going to talk about today? Say it together. Fears. Okay, that worked out well. All right, so we have been talking about this off the podcast, and we wanted to talk about it because our three faithful listeners, we will want to involve you in the conversation. And so everything that we've gone through in this journey, in these last days in our spiritual journeys, and then navigating these earth, most of the time, actually, would I be wrong in saying all of the time we any problems that we face, the temptation or the thing that we go through is fearing the outcome of the unknown. Anything unknown I'm scared of, or at least that's what I've been going through. Is that safe to say? Everything can be fear-based if we let it, or it's faith-based. Is it just those two options?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
And this will become clear. And by the way, this is a topic that we're going to bring up often. That I feel like this is going to be a book. My friend Benji and I were talking about this. Thank you. And it boiled down to fears and identifying them. And so our main focus, we felt like we were hacking away at branches and leaves and like at problems, trying to pursue a blessing, or it could be career. Career is a huge one. Mm-hmm. So financial, you want an income, you don't want to feel like a slave to your life. No, that's a huge one in people's lives. So, instead of looking for that blessing of that job, it's really hacking away at fears. So when you identify them, and in one of my books, I'll just hold up in the other book I wrote, 2020 Now, Seeing the Hand of God in Real Time, I brush across fears, and there's some epiphanies that we have that I've had with Benji, with you, as we talk about fears. It's such a huge topic. It goes into our relationships. It goes into our career pursuits. It goes into our just everything we could think about, fears or faith, and the difference between the two.
Isn't that what your movie was called that you're working on, was Cave of Fears?
I wasn't thinking about that at that time. No, my friend wrote that, and I was helping him with that. Okay. But who knows? Maybe we'll make it now. I don't know. But it was. I wrote in my book that when the analogy of all the doors closed, and I didn't know what to do, and I went through this process of scared, but when all the doors close, one opens. We've heard about that. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, there's a key point in that when you feel like your doors have closed, and there's a point, if you are continually praying and trying to figure it out, there's a point where you start to think about your fears and then facing them. And once you get to that point, you feel like you're in a giant's fist, and you're getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and then finally something has to pop out, of the fingers, and you feel like you're going to burst out somewhere. And so I feel like your situations that we're in, career-wise, financially, whatever, that we get into sometimes, and then we get this fear situation. All the doors close. Why? I'm questioning everything. What's going on? And then something happens when your fear turns into faith. You start this is where your fears really pop up. It's like uncovers something deeper inside of you. And then you recognize a fear that you've always known that was there, but it's been buried. And then you make a decision. Do I want to go there or not? Am I scared of traveling outside of the country and doing something out there? You know, I had an opportunity to teach English in, I think Korea or not North Korea, South Korea. It was something like that. And there were fears based off that. I'm like, what is this? It's a new venture for me. I didn't know what they were doing. You know, it's totally new to me. This is an example, but everything else in my life was closing down. It's like shut. And so I want to bring this up as an example, so you could have something to draw from instead of being general. But it was I get into that circumstance, and now I'm like, I have no options. But then there's a point I get to where I'm like, fine, I'm going to think of everything. And so I think of, am I going to move? Am I going to go to Fiji? Am I going to go out? You know, I just think of everything, and that I've never thought of before. And then I start identifying fears. And then I'm like, oh, I fear this, whatever, because it's the unknown. It's like something I've never done before. I'm new at it. Am I going to mess up? Am I going to be financially strapped and in debt? Am I going to, all these fears are real. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to, what are people going to think of me, you know, if I just do something like this? So there's all the fears that are just wrapped up in it. But once you get into that position, and I feel like sometimes you feel like it's like, why is God doing this? I feel like it's a divine thing to really show when your fears pop up and you face your fears, then opportunities open up. And that's when we say a door opens, because you've faced your fear, and then a door opens. And so when I was thinking about that, I'm like, this is an entire book. There's no way we could talk about all of our fears.
Yeah.
And then we can get into dating. We can get into like our career paths. Our entrepreneurship is a huge one. So I think that was the end of my thought.
It's good for me to jump in, because there was I don't know if I talked about this in a different podcast. I thought so, but I should say episode. Okay, so about a little over 7 years ago, I moved back here, and this is when my wife and I made a big leap of faith to start our own thing. I left full-time employment, and but we really felt compelled to come back here to Iowa and raise our kids here in the Midwest and have more of a Midwest lifestyle. But our industry, there's not a lot of work, and I didn't know what I wanted to do that way, but it was a leap of faith. So I thought that it was going to be 6 months and I would be on my feet again and stuff like that. And you know, we're set and we're able to buy a house and whatever. So that didn't happen. It took about 7 years. But what's interesting is I learned those principles that you're talking about. And one of my fears was I wouldn't be able to take care of my family financially. And because that goes down a deeper level of what my responsibility is in mine and my wife's situation, it was my responsibility to go and do that. And so there's the age-old example of, oh, we should always pay our tithing, and we should do that before anything. And we hear the example of, well, it was this 1 month and we couldn't afford, we either had to pay the mortgage or tithing, but not both. We didn't have enough for both. And so we paid our tithing, and then something miraculous would happen so that we were able to also pay the mortgage. Okay, that was the test. That's the leap of faith or whatever. And that's good. I think it's a good, maybe a start, right? A start to look at the way faith works. But what happened with me is that I would pay tithing and nothing would happen. Okay. So then, but what was interesting, and this is why it can be a book, and this is why it will come up in other episodes, because it looks different almost every single time, and the approach is different every single time. So that's why it's important to seek out, to have a personal relationship with Christ, to know, this time I'm going to do this. And for example, I'll keep talking about what happened to me was, so I thought surely the Lord wouldn't let me go, so my bank account would go to $0. And that was totally disruptive for me. That totally I was scared out of my mind, basically, that was going to happen.
Or go in the negative and stay there.
And so that's what happened.
Okay.
So that's my point. So then I was like, we would okay. So then that was my level at that time, right? My capacity. That's what in my mind, that's all I thought was possible. Okay, so that I would just go to 0. But that month it went below 0, okay? So that broke. And so the point why I'm bringing this up is I learned my threshold was different than the Lord's threshold for me, that he knew that I was more capable of than I thought I was, or something. Maybe that. But point is, my standard, we'll say, was that. But he broke that, right? And so then I go, whoa, this is bad. And so, I did find some help. Maybe the church helped me or something like that. But again, I would be back up to, but then I would go try to find work, but then you just to make up the negative to get back up to 0. And then beyond that was just, and
then you
trying to claw to get out.
And then you had to sell your van, and a guy he kept the license plates and kept getting speeding tickets.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And you had to pay for them all, and you couldn't stop them.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
I remember thinking that this is just kicking you when you're down.
Yeah, so we had this van, and I know that you need to take the license plates off of the car when you sell it. But also, another good person understands that too, that they should get their own license plates. And I was traveling at the time, and so I didn't have time to take them off, and I forgot about it. And he came up to pick up the van to buy it. And then, he proceeded to, he drove with our license plates on and got racked up. It was like $1,400 in tickets across the country.
And you were trying hard to pay your bills on top of that.
Yeah.
You're trying everything to stop, cancel your plates, but you can't do
They
that.
couldn't. They wouldn't cancel. I talked to the police. I talked to the DMV, and they are like, well, we need the plates or something. And I'm like, they're on the car. He's getting tickets. And then I have Washington D.C. judges, sending me these things. If you don't pay this, then this is going to happen. If you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And you could go to jail, all these things.
Oh my gosh. That was I remember that. It was imprinted in my mind.
Lesson, take your license plates off your car if you sell it. Oh my goodness. So anyway, so the Lord broke the boundaries of what I thought would be what I thought my boundaries were.
And I was also thinking, and I know your wife Bethany, it was for sure it caused strain, because not only stress on you, but on any marriage that would cause strain. But for people with they can go through downs, big time. But if there's a base of where do you turn for faith, and what is your priority, then that is a perfect example of not only keeping your own soul intact and not going crazy, but a marriage and a relationship, and it expands and everything. So that's a perfect example of turning a huge fear that can destroy yourself and others, the relationships that will, and then turn it into faith. And it's when I say that, I have to emphasize that it's never easy and nobody's perfect at it.
Yeah, I'm still working through that.
Yeah, you're still in relationships and all that stuff. But there's always a bedrock that sometimes you have to get to bedrock to really hit home with that faith and turn it into faith. But that's like...
Yeah. So after about, I don't know how many times of going past the 0 mark. Oh, also, by the way, we sold that van to him for, I think it was $1,200 or $1,400. It was literally the exact same amount that he got in tickets that I had to pay for. So he got the van for free. Anyway, and then he went and sold it to someone else. Anyway, so that after those boundaries were broken, I kind of changed my perspective. It was kind of like I gave up, but I didn't give up in anger against the Lord. I gave up the idea that I had to have money in my bank account in order to be happy or whatever. Like that's what I thought the standard of life is or something. So I think fear, it was more turned into, like, honestly, it wasn't that bad for me anymore. And then not that I was like, I disregarded bills or any, in the sense of like, but I look at them different, right? I look at these things differently, that I approach them differently. I approach finances differently. I'm still okay going and buying stuff, but I don't have no attachment to it, and it doesn't make me happier. Because of that, because I was stripped of what I thought was necessary to a good quality life, I guess, or something. And so, or what it was supposed to be, whatever that ideal was, and having a good attitude during that time, during those difficult times. Now, I still have things that I'm working through and fears and stuff, but it's way shorter lived. So I get through things quicker. If I have a down time, probably on a weekly basis, there's probably a few days where it's, I might, it's like I wake up at 3 a.m. and sometimes I have to like, really, really, command evil spirits to leave, because I feel attacked or whatever it is, but they're wanting, the adversary or Satanist wanting you to feel fear so that you stop making good decisions and you start making natural man decisions, something that will make you feel good in the interim, but not have a relationship with the Lord because it's his fault that you're this way or whatever. But anyway, so that trial it's very special to me, and it's a gem that I will take with me for the eternity, because it actually shows me there are lessons in that I'll never forget, and it's changed me again, my regard for what I think I should get from the Lord. That's kind of all stripped away of what I think I deserve or I think I need or whatever. It's more of, it's less of, Father, I need this. I actually don't really have those prayers anymore. It's more of, if I lack understanding, help me to understand thy will, and I'm going to try these things. And if they don't work, just try to help me understand so I can gain perspective. Really, it's perspective. Fear, I think, is the unknown, and faith is having trust that it's going to be okay, but it's hard to just wield that. And I think so then I seek out a conversation with somebody. I seek out, scriptures or a talk or something on YouTube that is beneficial to you, and then you gain perspective, and all of a sudden that fear washes away. So for me, it's gaining perspective enough to get rid of fear and to keep going, versus caving in with fear and not doing anything, not being productive, or whatever. So point is, yes, I'm still struggling with that, but that's what I love about this principle is, as we learn more about fear and how it is, changing us, or maybe it will push us to do things if we let it, and lead us to places that aren't good, that aren't beneficial to us. So, and they can be sneaky. And so I think that if we point at it and we say, hey, it's any fear that we have that will make us stumble. So if we look for those things in our lives and look at the things that makes that we do fear and confront them, and actually, so I have another example. I went through this time in my life where I was in the Army, and my wife at that time, I was previously married, and she left. She didn't want to be married to me anymore, and I was, as I was in the basic training, and then anyway, I'm skimming over a lot of very, very difficult, very, a lot of these things that we'll probably bring up later, but the point was, there was a lot of fear afterwards of what do you call it? Facing people. Like, I felt so embarrassed. I felt whatever,
So a fear to go back to church and where people know you and they knew you were married, but don't know that things have changed.
Yeah. And so I was faced with two options. One option was, and this was what I was debating, because when I was going to come home from basic training, I just kind of wanted to move to California with my friend and not face any of this stuff and just kind of avoid that. Or I felt compelled, and I felt compelled to come back, even though it's going to be hard. But I also felt very, very compelled as well. And again, I didn't have perspective at the time, but it was more of, I at least just sucked it up, held my breath, but did it, and moved back. And each time I knew I would face a situation, I had to take some deep breaths, but then go in, right? So sometimes it was at church, and I would have to take some deep breaths, go to church, and then, but each time that would happen, and somebody would bring it up, like, hey, well, where's your wife, or whatever, and they would so it would be like, well, it's a deep conversation all of a sudden, a heavy conversation with somebody that was just flippantly asking where my family
was. And now they feel really embarrassed.
And now they feel, exactly. So all these things that I hated and I didn't want to do that. But for some reason, I felt it was for my situation. So this isn't a blanket statement for everybody, but for my situation, I needed to go through that. I needed to keep going, because then as I would go through those experiences, it got easier and easier every time. And then it was done, meaning it was eventually, it was washed away, that any kind of fear, bitterness, or whatever. And that's actually what attracted me to Bethany, is that we went to I didn't, anyway, this is probably a whole nother story and a podcaster, but it's more of a we had this conversation together about fear. Like, she was coming home after serving a mission for our church, and she was deathly scared of life, basically, and finding somebody, and but she had all this attention from all these people, and she it was like debilitating to her. She didn't want that, and so we actually had this conversation together, and because of that conversation, because I was able to just kind of dispel it, I said everything that I just said right now about like what I went through with my previous wife, and I had to do these things. I had to push through it, and but eventually I came out better because of that, because I pushed through it. If I had just avoided it, I wouldn't have progressed. I just would have started a new life somewhere else, and there wasn't much progression that way. And so she took encouragement from that, and that's initially what, I didn't ask her out at that time, and when all these other people were or whatever, but we had that conversation, and it was really awesome. And she was like, okay, I think I'm okay now, like after we had that. Now had I, all because I went through it and I was able to describe it, and then it gave her enough courage to be and dispel and perspective and all that, to be able to now, well, okay, I'm going to go through these things now. So that's why it's special to me. This is a special subject, because that's one of the things that led to me getting married to Bethany. We've been married for over 15 years now, and it's like, and again, it's like we were married at the beginning. It's like we've progressed and changed, but we've grown together. So that's what I love about it. Anyway, so those are the examples of fear in my life. And now, of course, I've gone through debilitating fears with career and some other things that I have had to work through. But I guess maybe we just use this as encouragement to look inside yourself and and ourselves, because we're currently going through it right now, anything, and find those things that you have fear of facing, and together with the Lord, that's the key word, is with Him, face them, because sometimes our definition of facing them might be off, might be different. It might not have to look like the way that you think you have to face it. It's more of anyway, point is, that's why it's important to be close to the Lord, because there's no way that there's a blanket statement that applies in every case, but at least the blanket statement could be, it is possible to get rid of all fear. You have to now navigate that with the Lord, but because we can't go through every scenario we will with examples and stuff, but you can start now without having all those examples, that it is possible, and it's actually for our benefit, if we do have fear of something. But yeah, a lot of our actions are motivated out of either fear or faith.
Yeah, we're talking about lifelong pursuits of overcoming fears, and I thought of an image in my mind that first time somebody jumps out of a plane to go parachuting, incredibly hard, even to have the thought of getting up into a plane to do this. And so, and even base jumpers. And so I'm thinking of this because there's always, even though you have faced this fear before and made the jump, there's always that first initial, it takes your breath away, because there's still more fears. Like I guarantee, I've never talked to a base jumper before, but I'm like, I guarantee there's that first initial facing that fear. But then there's, after I'm imagining that after the parachute comes out, and they're like, oh, that was great. So the first initial rush is like facing that fear. I've actually learned to really love that feeling, because whenever it's hard to sometimes identify the fear, but whenever that situation pops up, like, okay, now that I'm searching for fears, my radar is on, now I know that's a fear. And like, facing fears will open up to revelation. It'll open up to perspective. It'll open up to blessings. And this lifelong pursuit is to overcome fears, and fears are inspired by you know who. And Satan just can really control people through fears and suppress and all of these things. So when we're riddled with fear, we're just like fears of this or that, whatever subject, then blessings can really be hindered. So we're basically talking about the definition of why we have faith in Christ, because we don't know all things. We're learning. And so when we're inspired to do something, we don't know the outcome. We don't know how things are going to turn out. But when we actually go forward and trust that feeling, then we're having faith in Christ. And this could be in every aspect of our lives. And I also want to describe the times that when all of things have been taken away, when maybe our health, our finances, you were describing your experience with, like, it's not only at zero, but it went to negative. Now you're getting late fees, and it's getting even worse. And then overdraft fees, and it's even getting even worse. And then you get creditors coming at you, threatening this or that. And it's so hard to come through that. But you were describing the blessing. You started to detach from that. This is what I'm describing is whenever you find yourself in that position of everything has been taken away from you, you feel like that. Like your marriage, your life, your health, you're in bed sick, your whatever, your body, like mine was like horrible back problems, a back injury that just took me out for a couple years. And everything was taken away from me. I felt like I was ambitious. I was like ready to take on the world. And then this happens. And then my whole life is upside down. And my financially and I feel like everything was taken away from me. And there's a point where I really feel like the Lord wants to take everything that this world can inflict upon you. He takes it all away so that you don't fear anything that this world can do. And I feel that's a common lesson for people who have had a near-death experience or just like faced physical death and pain, is when that happens that they come out of that and they don't fear death anymore. They don't feel that anymore, and their compassion is full for other people, and they try to help those others. So it turns into a mission too. So, but they don't fear it, and the other people who struggle with that same fear, they can help out and console. And then I could talk about dating. This could be a whole nother topic too. So we might want to break this up and do a couple podcasts, but
Yeah.
whenever we reach like an hour or something. But dating can be. So I wrote a book about it, so you can read that book, get updated on what I'm talking about. But fears are huge, 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 huge. A lot of the fears are in dating. All the dating rules, all the dating games are based off of fear. You want to control the outcome. And so you have a rule on something. You have a fear of getting hurt, and so you either recoil really quick, or you check out society, or you are way cautious about everything, or you control your next relationship or something. You're a controlling person, but you feel justified in controlling them. And so there's so many fears based off of pain that you've experienced before. So somewhere along the lines in our childhood, we pick up on these fears somewhere. And these, so a lot of the dating rules are geared towards protecting yourself from being hurt again, or becoming vulnerable, or something like that. So becoming vulnerable is a huge one. And my friend, we've been talking about the dating world and how sometimes he he has overcome fears. I have overcome some fears that I've identified, and every fear I identify, I'm like, okay, there's one. Let's get it out now that I'm looking for him. And so, but I can't help other people overcome the fear. And so I recognize it in other people. I'm like, I used to have that fear, and now you're having it, and I could go on a date with you, and I could ask you out, but you're having this fear. And I'm like, I can't do much about that. But I can do what I can about my own fears. So this is like, it gets deep into the dating world, gets deep into our everyday life. We could just go off on a list of stuff, but yeah.
So I think for this one, at least we can end with starting to identify them and pay attention to them, but look at it without conclusions, making conclusions like, oh, since I have a fear of this, or since I'm scared of that, then this. This is my big thing in my life, is stop drawing conclusions to things, because that will help. Conclusions meaning, let's say, oh, the Lord is directing me to do this thing. So therefore, and it's always that therefore for me that we have to stop, because we can be set ourselves up for failure. Meaning, I'm interested in this thing, so then therefore I must be this. I must be I'm trying to think of a specific example. Like, I'm interested in video, so then therefore I'm going to be a filmmaker, and I'm going to be like Steven Spielberg. So because that's what I feel inspired to do, so that's my path. Well, that's me making that own conclusion. So I need to back up and just, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to pursue and learn more about it, and until the Lord says, that's done, now do this. And stop making conclusions, because I would disappoint myself, or I would get disappointed, and this thing didn't work. And then I get down, because back then I just made that interpretation myself. That wasn't him saying, you are going to become the next Steven Spielberg.
I have a fear associated with that I've had before, that I've had to get over. And it was the time I really wanted to get into filmmaking, storytelling, video, however I could do it. I had all these dreams that popped up, developed really quickly. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, that very thing, get an Academy Award. I'm going to take over Hollywood or something. And the fear that came up along the path was none of those things were working. And so I was forced to think of other things to do. And then I was like, other thing, I'm thinking of a job. Okay, I had to get a job. I'm like, this is totally different. It was like working with kids with autism. Totally, I had a fear of, this is going to distract me from my goal and dreams of accomplishing that. So I felt like this thing. I'm like, well, I should do this, because it felt like this girl brought it up, and she was like, oh, you can just do this. And it was working out to get this job. And it was like, it's working out. I don't want this to work out because it's off my path.
Yeah.
But it was working out, and I'm like, okay, it's working out. So I'm like, I'll go in that direction. I have to trust that. I was anxious to get back on my path. And so now that I have hindsight, I'm like, that was an amazing experience. I learned so much about teaching children and connecting with that. And it was a very a good education of knowing children with autism, but just children in general. And, I've never married. I'm not a father, but through that experience, I was able to gain some insights. And I learned later also that it doesn't matter in filmmaking and storytelling, you experience life, and those are the stories that are rich. And so I'm like, okay, I'm open to any experience. and I trusted that my path will come back that I really wanted, and my dreams and stuff, and they always do. Your talents always come back, meaning your ability to do them. And so that was a major fear of mine, of like, I don't want to do anything else other than what I have planned on, and I want to accomplish those dreams. I want to be the guy who has what it takes to do this. And I don't want to be the guy who gives up on this in fear of what other people say to me. I'm like, you gave up on it. The shaming, which is a huge thing in the industry too. It's like, oh, you didn't have what it takes, or you gave up so you went into teaching. It's like the shaming part of it. So I don't want to face that. Or it's like, you didn't have, you gave up on it, or you're one of the ones that gave up, like all those fears, like you're facing fears of that just because I didn't want to deviate from my plan and what I thought I should do. So, and that's the real sense of finding inspiration and hearing the Lord's voice, because the Lord's voice, he's going to inspire you, even though it's not what you really want right now. And so it takes a lot of faith to like face that fear, all those other list of fears in that moment, and to trust him, trust his path. And then later you'll get the like, oh, I see what he was doing. I'm really glad he did that for me.
Yep. I think that's 90% of my adult life is looking back and saying, oh, I get it. And I'm appreciative of it. There are some things that took 20 years to understand.
Yeah.
So, I think, and this maybe we're applying this to the creative field as far as when we go off on these career ones, but it's that's why I think it drives the creatives. It can really disrupt, because our creativity isn't rewarded until you're explosively successful. So there's a big gap between the people that are not getting paid for their creativity and the people that are, and there's not very many people in the middle.
If you haven't sold your soul to get there.
So that's where that's where we do have to place trust in the Lord. This isn't you want to be a doctor, well then here's the path. You go to the school, you get accepted into this, and then you do this, and then blah blah blah, and then you're there. There is none of that in the creative field.
But the principle, I want to insert this, that some people who have started on that path, but who are prevented because they couldn't. I think there's His Grace story about that, actually. I could find that, because that goes in exactly. This guy had a plan. He's going to pre-med. He's going to go into be a doctor. He's going to do this. This is a beautiful example of that. And he gets a stroke, I think, or it was some stroke, and he was disabled. He had to like learn how to think again and like do things again. He's like partially, and so he got married during that time. It has a lot of strain on his wife, because he gets horribly demotivated, and his wife is having to kind of help him push along, but he's demotivated, and he's in his pajamas, and like he's been trying, but like he wanted to be a doctor. So there's something that like is more than just his current circumstances.
Oh yeah. So
we can go off on that on the current circumstances of men and women in that dynamic. But even, we could think of a lot of men and fathers and that dynamic in a relationship where they're disappointed, but there's something bigger going on here. But that was a good example of the lessons that he had to learn, and they're learning in their relationship, and the bigger perspective that forces them to really think outside of their path that they wanted.
Yeah, that's an incredible blessing, because it doesn't happen. I think I think this is a great place to end, but this one, because I want to hear eventually from other people's examples that might listen or watch, in the comments. Go ahead and talk about the things that you've seen, because there are so many examples that it actually helps me to understand. So for example, like the doctor, it's like, going through all that and then not being able to do it. That's actually it's a sign that the Lord is working with you, that you have to go through something like that. Now that's hard, but I get happy when I hear examples like this, because it shows me, I know the results. The results are always amazing when people take it the right way. Eventually they get through it, when they get through it.
Are we better than Job? Are we better than the Savior? Like, we're getting insight on, like, what are the purposes of our universe being shattered, of our health, of our family, of our finances, of everything being done. Job, his story was something that brought me through, him and Joseph Smith. So there's, and others, Jesus, of course, but like there's major, Jesus faced the worst future. This is another thing about the future. If we could look at a bright future, or we could look at a dismal one. Mm-hmm. You look at Jesus Christ. Do you think he had a dismal future, like in his mortal life, or Job, or anybody else? It's the perspective. Mm-hmm. It's the beyond this life faith in him. And so when he had this plan with God the Father, and he knew it, and he was following the Father, and perfectly. And so when he died, he didn't skip a beat. He was in the afterlife continuing. And then he comes back for 40 days and continues to train his apostles. And it didn't skip a beat, kept going. That's how we could face the future, is like with that in mind, what Jesus did, even death. Like,
yeah. Yep. And that's exactly it. That's another boundary that was drawn for me, that I drew myself, or at least influenced by culture, is you do this to get here, so that your career is here, so that by the time you're blah, 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 you can retire. No. Well, this isn't working out, so therefore I'm not satisfied with my life.
Yeah.
It's not working out the way that people are saying it should or it needs to. And
then they say things like, "Oh, you're doing it wrong."
Yeah, you did it wrong.
Conclusions,
Yeah, you draw conclusions, and then wait a minute. If you follow the Lord,
transactional religion, you should you put in, you should get out, right?
Yeah. So like that's the other thing. It's like truly following the Lord. When you start to have that relationship with Him, you start to see earth life completely different and the purpose of it, and you go, okay. So now actually that dispels fear on its own of just coming closer to Him, because just that fact that you understand,
what I'm getting back are treasures of knowledge, and a heart of gold refined, or something. I think that was in the book of Job or something.
Yeah.
But that's the treasure you come with, you can take with you for eternity.
So on the surface, it looks crazy. Yeah. They're like, you must be doing something wrong. The universe is telling you, or whatever, you're manifesting all these wrong things in life or whatever. But it's actually, this, go ahead, we keep saying this could be another episode, but it's, we have our unique journeys, and I think those who listen to the Lord will then be taken on a special journey. Once you're at a certain point, then you'll take this other set of special trials. Not that you're better than anyone, but it's more of, now that you're listening to me, we're going to go somewhere else, and we're going to test that.
I'm going to put another link, if I could find this video, another good example of a guy who was in sports. He was in I can't remember, is Tyler maybe his first name. There's a short message about him. But he really in shape in sports, promising future, and he gets paralyzed. Mm-hmm. And there was a time that his father was listening to him, and Tyler I think his name was Tyler. He says, you know, Dad. And his dad immediately thought, oh, this is the time where he's going to despair. And Tyler says, I think I have reached the summit of another mountain, or something like that. It was like he has overcome another mountain that he never thought of. That's an inspiring story. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
And